Hey tubers, it's Ben the Curious Consumer and welcome back to the channel. Yesterday we had a huge announcement from Sony and Mark Cerny. They gave us the specs for the PlayStation 5, which is something that was long awaited. Microsoft has already been speaking about what their specs are. They've already been having people come out and check out the systems and try it out. Whereas yesterday we were hoping for something really, really big. And we got about half of that. So we got some information about the PlayStation 5, not all of the information. We still don't know what it looks like. We still haven't seen the performance that the PlayStation 5 is going to deliver. However, we heard a lot of numbers, and we kind of got a education, if you will. Mark Cerny sat in that conference much like a professor in a college, which was kind of lackluster, if you ask me. It wasn't super exciting. They went into a typical speech where he had three main points and then kind of went off on those three main points. One smart move that Sony had here, however, was to make sure that with all of the stuff going on right now and the quarantines going on around the country, they had a dedicated audience. They had a lot of people watching. The start of the conference, I was pretty bored. I thought I was going to see a lot of really cool things. You know, in that Sony's E3 press conferences, they typically have a lot of gameplay and they show a lot of cool stuff. In this one, it's more like charts, graphs, and talking. So it kind of almost lost me halfway through. I almost fell asleep. It was that kind of boring. Mark Cerny's voice is very calming. And let's talk about the next generation of console. So at that point, I didn't feel like I was super excited. I mean, I wanted the numbers, but at the same time, I was just like, wow, can we get to something solid? And he kept talking about how he's going to talk about that stuff later. And he never got to the things that I really wanted to see. And I think that goes for everyone, actually, that watched the conference. I don't think a lot of people got what they wanted out of it. I know we got the numbers, the sheer numbers and sheer power, but we didn't get the look of the console. We didn't see what the new controllers are going to look like. We didn't get any of that. It felt more like a developer sales pitch, if you will. Their main focus for this next generation console was the speed of the SSD. That's no surprise for anyone that sits through what feels like 10 years of rendering time when you're trying to play a game like Red Dead, how long it takes for that loading time to come in, or Spider-Man, and how long that loading time takes. They focused on that for the developer. They could render worlds a lot faster instead of going through a spindle drive where, you know, information is stored all over the game. And they talked about this with Spider-Man. You could go through and it will render, but it would render like 400 of the same things throughout the drive, so it would be harder for the drive to find all the assets that it needed to load that next sequence. So they wanted to focus on speed, which brings me to my next point. They did mention how much space was going to be internal on the PlayStation 5, and it's a weird number. It's 825 gigabytes is what they're saying is going to be their SSD size. And that's based on studies of what people need with games that are on the PlayStation 4 now. So 825 gigabytes, and not all of that is going to be usable for storage. It's going to be maybe 500 gigabytes of that will be used for storage. But that's just me speculating about how much, because the other parts are going to be used for rendering different parts of the game, so they have less loading times. Yes, speed is big. It's going to be about 5.5 gigabytes per second of throughput for the SSD when you're using RAW, and 8 to 9 gigabytes of compressed throughput through that SSD. So blazing fast. I mean, there's no joke, but there will still be some loading times. You got to talk about maybe a second or two. Definitely different than the 30 seconds that we might have, or a minute in some cases that we have for games now on a spindle drive. SSD is what they claim to be 100 times faster than the last generation, or this current generation that we're in now, the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. So 100 times faster than what we're getting now. So really looking forward to that speed boost. Comparing that to the Xbox, you're talking 2.5 gigabytes per second because they're using a standard NVMe storage that's internal. The external stuff is a little different. Sony is going to be allowing you to do external hard drives on their PlayStation 5, but it has to meet a specific standard. So you're going to be able to buy whichever one you want. It's just got to meet a specific standard in order to work for the system. Whereas Xbox is going to be coming out with proprietary drives that are about 1 terabyte in size, but you're going to be able to get those hopefully on launch day. Looks like in some of the videos that I've seen online that it's going to be mostly like Seagate drives that they're going to be utilizing, which is no surprise. Seagate's been making drives for Xbox and PlayStation 4 for this whole last generation. You can still put external hard drive on the systems. The issue with external is it's not going to run as fast as the internal, so you're going to have varying speeds there. So you're not going to be able to put the PlayStation 5 games on a portable hard drive externally to the system, because it's not going to match the speeds that they require their PlayStation 5 games to have. But you could use it for storage, which in Xbox's case is the same thing. You can still use the external, but you can't use the Xbox Series X games through the USB port. It can only be for external storage. In this case, I see that this is a very smart move, considering most cable companies nowadays give you a data cap on what you can download from the internet. So if you're downloading a game, like let's say you downloaded Red Dead, which is over 100 gigabytes of a game. So you download over 100 gigabytes of information, you get 1 terabyte of storage, or 1 terabyte of data usage through your cable company, unless you're paying for unlimited, which is a higher price. But you're getting that 100 gigabyte game downloaded. And let's say you don't have enough space on your system, so now you're going to erase it, and then the next month download that again. So you're losing 100 gigabytes pretty much every time you want to download that game. In this case, if you have an external hard drive, let's say 4 terabyte, 5 terabyte hard drive, you can download the games and store it on there, but when you're ready to play it, move something from the internal hard drive to the external, and then move the external to the internal. It's probably the smartest way to do it, and that way you're not getting kind of like overcharged from your cable company. So I think that's kind of a smart way to look at it, as opposed to an inconvenient way to look at it. Almost like having your own little, I guess, network server at home with an external hard drive. When it came to the speed of the compute units and things like that, it seemed to me like Sony and Mark Cerny were trying to justify this by having lower teraflop output. Now, we've heard teraflops before. The PlayStation 4 Pro pushes like 4 teraflops. The Xbox One X pushes 6 teraflops. Teraflops became a big terminology in last gen. Mark Cerny is really trying to have us understand that the teraflop rate doesn't really make a difference, whereas their system is going to operate at 10.3 teraflops, the Xbox Series X is going to be operating at 12 teraflops. Is that really going to make a huge difference in the next generation? Only time will tell on that. But in this generation, does it make a difference? Yeah, it does, but it's a minuscule difference. When you look at the 6 teraflops compared to the 4 teraflops of the PlayStation 4 Pro, the PlayStation 4 Pro still pushes really good graphics, and Xbox One X pushes a higher resolution of graphics. However, with checkerboard rendering and other rendering techniques, the PlayStation 4 Pro has been able to keep up in some areas. Now, do I think teraflops are going to make a big difference? If you're wanting raw power, I think yes. In the long run, I think you're going to get more out of a super powerful system with limitations on that lower end system. So it can cause a bit of an issue down the road. Now, that all depends on how the cooling unit is on both systems and what kind of issues you might have at launch. There might be some, I know in Xbox 360 days, there was the red ring of death. In the PlayStation 4 days, it was the HDMI port. So there were issues, but can these systems stay cool enough to keep these processors running at the high rate that they need to run at to push the 4K 60 or 8K graphics that they claim these systems are going to be able to push? So Sony also announced something of a new audio engine that's going to be coming out called the Tempest 3D engine. So the Tempest 3D engine is not for graphics. The Tempest engine is for audio. So this sounds really cool. Mark Cerny did talk a lot about how 3D audio was going to be the future of how we immerse ourselves in the games. Now, this has been a truth for quite a while now, since at least PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, where sound was the big deal. And so when Turtle Beach came out with their headsets, that was like the gold standard. You buy a Turtle Beach headset. And then this generation, it was Astros and how that immerses you into the game. And there's a lot of great gaming headsets out there. But what he's talking about is something called 3D audio. And if you have a PlayStation 4 and you have their highest end headset, if you played Uncharted 4 was the first game that actually had 3D audio effects in it. Whereas if you were going around something, it would give you spatial audio. I know that we talk about hearing people behind you, but really it's more like hearing people off to the side so you know to turn around. And that's where he's talking, Mark Cerny's talking about how their engine is going to give you 1,000 points as opposed to just like 1 or 2 points or 3 points of where the audio is coming from. So you might hear somebody like in Rainbow Six where they're running across the room, so you can actually hear exactly where their steps are located, where it goes across the room and maybe behind you and down some stairs. You'll be able to hear that. Whereas in the 3D audio that we have now, you might just hear them upstairs, and then you hear them off to the side, so you can turn around to know that they're around you. This is going to give you a whole nother experience, an immersion into the game. I think that's really, really cool. Microsoft has something like this as well. You know, time is going to tell. The thing about the PlayStation 5 is when he's talking about 3D audio, it's not something that's really focused on right now. Mark Cerny did say it's unfinished. So this isn't ready right now. This is something we're going to get some sound profiles as we go. So when he mentioned that maybe about 4 or 5 of those profiles are going to be available at launch, but he's hoping that these audio profiles are going to work with any headset. So that's where Sony's really trying to step above. They're trying to get any headset you put on, that it's going to give you that spatial audio no matter what kind of headset you have. One other thing they did speak about is backwards compatibility. Now, here's where I think Microsoft is really going to make a big splash going into the next generation, because backwards compatibility with Microsoft has always been a focus. So Xbox 360, you could play Xbox original games. With the Xbox One, you can play Xbox 360, and this took a little while, Xbox 360 and original Xbox games. Well, their library is into the thousands right now with what kind of backwards compatible games are available for the next gen consoles. So Microsoft has made it a thing. They are going to have that going forward, where they want generational leaps with their consoles, and everything will be forward and backwards compatible. I mean, Xbox's controller that you get for the Xbox Series X is going to be usable on the Xbox One, and Xbox One controllers are going to be usable on the Xbox One X. So if you bought one of those Elite controllers, you're still going to be able to use that on the next gen console, which is kind of neat. Sony hasn't mentioned anything about their controllers, but what they did mention is about their backwards compatibility. And what their backwards compatibility looks like is not really what we expected. What Mark Cerny mentioned was they're looking at possibly having about 100 games available from PlayStation, select PlayStation 4 games available for backwards compatibility when the next console comes out. So we're not even getting full backwards compatibility, we're just getting about 100 games for PlayStation 4. And it's a legacy engine, so it's an emulator that they're going to be running, which is similar to what Xbox is doing now. So it's emulated software that is going to be making the backwards compatibility possible. But it's not going to be your PlayStation 3, your PlayStation 2, or your PlayStation 1 games. My feeling is they're still going to be using their version of Game Pass, where you're going to be able to download or stream those older games to the console, but they didn't mention anything about that. What they did mention was hopefully they can have 100 games available for launch, but please don't be upset if we don't, is basically what Mark Cerny said. So backwards compatibility, while it is a focus and they see it as a valid thing to be focused on because Microsoft is focused on it and it really helped them sell consoles last gen, they just haven't hit all the points yet. So what does the next generation really have in store for us is still a blur. We still don't know. We can kind of deduct some ideas of what's going to be happening in the next generation of consoles, and while I am a big fan of every console, I don't have one favored over the other, I definitely feel that right now, with the announcement that they made yesterday, Sony told a lot of information but didn't show a lot of stuff. And I feel that Microsoft showed a lot of stuff and then told a lot of information. And with that kind of philosophy, I think Microsoft right now might be gaining a lot more momentum going into the next generation of console rather than Sony and where they're kind of at right now. So I want to know your thoughts. What do you guys think? Do you think that this is going to make a very big difference in the next generation of console? Do you think that Sony's approach to how they gave the information was a smart approach or a good approach? Or do you feel that they should have shown a little bit of something to make us kind of salivate a little bit on the next generation. Well, guys, that's going to do it for me. I hope you found this video informational or informative. If you did, please drop us a like here at The Curious Consumer. We definitely do appreciate it. And as always, guys, stay curious, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.